Chaitana hyupapadyate. This is my doubt, O Krishna, and I ask you to dispel it completely. But for yourself, no one is to be found who can destroy this doubt. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Artha Niveha Namutra Vinashastasya Vidyate Nahi Kalyana Krit Kaschit Durgatim Tata Gacchati. The Blessed Lord said, Son of Pritha, a transcendentalist engaged in auspicious activities does not meet with destruction either in this world or in the spiritual world. One who does good, my friend, is never overcome by evil. Prapya punya kritam lokan ushitva shashvati samaha suchinam shrimatam gehe yoga brashdo bijayate. The unsuccessful yogi, after many, many years of enjoyment on the planets of the pious living entities, is born into a family of righteous people or into a family of rich aristocracy. Atava yoginam eva kule bhavati dimatam etadi durlabhartaram loke janma yad irdrisham. Or he takes his birth in a family of transcendentalists who are surely great in wisdom. Verily, such a birth is rare in this world. Tatratam buddhi samyogam labate purvadehikam yatate cha tato bhuya samsiddho kurunandana. On taking such a birth, he again revives the divine consciousness of his previous life, and he tries to make further progress in order to achieve complete success, O son of Kuru. Purva bhyasina tenaiva Riyate havasho pisaha jigyasur api yogasya shabda brahmati vartate. By virtue of the divine consciousness of his previous life, he automatically becomes attracted to the yogic principles, even without seeking them. Such an inquisitive transcendentalist striving for yoga stands always above the ritualistic principles of the scriptures. Pratyatnad yatamanastu Yogi samshuddha kilbishaha aneka janmasid samsiddhas tato yati param gatim. But when the yogi engages himself with sincere endeavor in making further progress, being washed of all contaminations, then ultimately, after many, many births of practice, he attains the supreme goal. Tapas vibhyo diko yogi yana Jnanibhyo pimato dikaha karmibhyaschadiko yogi tasmad yogi bhavarjuna. A yogi is greater than the ascetic, greater than the empiricist, and greater than the fruitive worker. Therefore, O Arjuna, in all circumstances, be a yogi. Yoginam api sarvesham madgaten antaratmana Shadavan bhajate yo mam same yukta tamo mataha. And of all yogis, he who always abides in me with great faith, worshipping me in transcendental loving service, is most intimately united with me in yoga and is the highest of all. So back to text 36. For one whose mind is unbridled, self-realization is difficult work. But he whose mind is controlled and who strives by right means is assured of success. That is my opinion. Purport. The Supreme Personality of Godhead declares that one who does not accept the proper treatment to detach the mind from material engagement can hardly achieve success in self-realization. Sorry, I'm going to repeat that one. The Supreme Personality of Godhead declares that one who does not accept the proper treatment to detach the mind from material engagement can hardly achieve success in self-realization. Trying to practice yoga while engaging the mind in material enjoyment is like trying to ignite a fire while pouring water on it. Similarly, yoga practice without mental control is a waste of time. Such a show of yoga practice may be materially lucrative, but it is useless as far as spiritual realization is concerned. Therefore, the mind must be controlled by engaging it constantly in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. Unless one is engaged in Krishna consciousness, he cannot steadily control the mind. A Krishna conscious person easily achieves the result of yoga practice without separate endeavor, but a yoga practitioner cannot achieve success without becoming Krishna conscious. So the mind is always trying to mislead the conditioned soul in the material world. Srila Prabhupada tells a really nice story in this regard called Liquid Beauty. Has anyone heard this story before? One fortunate hearer. He explains that there was a aristocratic man, like a prince, and he went around he somehow or other met this one beautiful woman. She was the most beautiful in every way. And he said, please, will you go on this date with me? Please. And she said, no. And he kept asking. And he said, please, you're so beautiful. I must enjoy your beauty. And I'm a prince, so why not? And she said, okay, if you want to enjoy my beauty, then just come back in 2 weeks and I'll be here and you can fully enjoy my beauty. It'll be great. So he waited for 2 weeks. And during this 2 weeks time, this lady, she took purgatives and laxatives, very violent varieties of them. And so she was vomiting constantly and passing lots of loose stools. And she stored them all in these big vats, these big pots, and kept them in a room. So eventually the prince, he comes back in 2 weeks' time and he knocks on the door. And someone opens the door and it's the same lady, but her skin is all discolored. Her eyes are dark and sunken in. She looks like bones now because she's lost so much weight. And he says, oh, I've come to see this beautiful woman. Where is she? And she says, that's me. He says, no, she was very beautiful. You're ugly. And she says, no, it's me. I've just separated my beauty. If you would still like to enjoy it, you can have it. You can enjoy my beauty. So he said, okay, sure, let's do that. So she says, just right this way. And she takes him to the storehouse where she kept all these vats, and she opens it, and then he sees and smells 2 weeks worth of the vats of this liquid beauty. So this is what the body that we become so attached to is actually made of, and what this so-called beauty really is. Because he was thinking this is such a beautiful person, but in 2 weeks' time, these were the materials of that beauty are separated, and here it is, and it's intolerable. He can't even breathe. So somehow or other, by the illusory energy of the Lord and being misled by the mind, we become attached to this. So we shouldn't be too attached to this body. And Krishna is explaining that to Arjuna and explaining also how to get out of it. The Blessed Lord said, O mighty armed son of Kunti, it is undoubtedly very difficult to curb the restless mind. Oh. Arjuna said, what is the destination of the man of faith who does not persevere, who in the beginning takes to the process of self-realization, but who later desists due to worldly mindedness, and thus does not attain perfection in mysticism? Purport. The path of self-realization or mysticism is described in the Bhagavad-gita. The basic principle of self-realization is knowledge that the living entity is not this material body, but that he is different from it, and that his happiness is in eternal life, bliss, and knowledge. These are transcendental, beyond both body and mind. Self-realization is sought by the path of knowledge, the practice of the eightfold system, or by bhakti yoga. In each of these processes, one has to realize the constitutional position of the living entity, his relationship with God, and the activities whereby he can reestablish the lost link and achieve the highest perfectional stage of Krishna consciousness. Following any of the above mentioned three methods, one is sure to reach the supreme goal sooner or later. This was asserted by the Lord in the second chapter. Even a little endeavor on the transcendental path offers a great hope for deliverance. Out of these three methods, the path of Bhakti Yoga is especially suitable for this age because it is the most direct method of God realization. To be doubly assured, Arjuna is asking Lord Krishna to confirm his former statement. One may sincerely accept the path of self-realization, but the process of cultivation of knowledge and the practice of the eightfold yoga system are generally very difficult for this age. Therefore, despite constant endeavor, one may fail for many reasons. First of all, one may not be following the process. To pursue the transcendental path is more or less to declare war on the illusory energy. Consequently, whenever a person tries to escape the clutches of the illusory energy, she tries to defeat the practitioner by various allurements. A conditioned soul is already allured by the modes of material energy, and there is every chance of being allured again. Even while performing transcendental disciplines, this is called yoga chalita manasaha, deviation from the transcendental path. Arjuna is inquisitive to know the results of deviation from the path of self-realization. So Krishna describes in the Bhagavad-gita that just one of the roaming senses can carry away the intelligence of even a person who's endeavoring to control the mind. Because the senses are very strong, and the material energy of the Lord is also very strong. So it's only by the mercy of the Lord that we can actually control the senses. And Krishna gives how that can be done in the Bhagavad-gita. So by following rules and regulations, the senses are controlled. Shri Shri Gaurnitai ki jai. Arjuna is now asking, what happens to one who falls down from this path of self-realization? One might be trying for a long time, doing all sorts of austerities, cultivating all sorts of transcendental knowledge. Who am I? What is the soul? Everyone is not their body. The Supreme Lord is situated in everyone's heart and directing their wanderings, all this knowledge. But still, because of the illusory energy of the Lord, somehow or other, he might fall down. So he's wondering what happens to one who does fall down. But before that, he asks Krishna to explain, or Krishna does explain, what is the whole process that makes one fall down into this material world. In the second chapter, right? We discussed this in the college club the other day. Let's see. There's a verse in the second chapter where Krishna tells Arjuna why one can fall down from the path of self-realization. Because Arjuna is wondering, what is it that makes somebody might know what is the right thing to do? Serve Krishna, follow these principles, don't do this, do that instead. They might know what's the right thing to do, but still they might not be able to do it. So Arjuna asks, why is that? They know it's right, but almost by force, they do the wrong thing. So Krishna tells him, you know which verse it is? 3. This is the same mistake we made in the club at the college. Okay, so in chapter 3, Krishna gives his answer. And he explains to Arjuna that it is lust only, Arjuna. This is what causes the living entity to fall down into this material world. Mm, this is like a key verse. I should know it by now. Oh, here it is. Okay. So, yes, chapter 3, text 37. He answers this question. How does it happen? They do the wrong thing almost by force. We know what the right thing is, but still end up doing the wrong thing. The Blessed Lord said, "It is lust only, Arjuna, which is born of contact with the material modes of passion and later transformed into wrath, and which is the all-devouring sinful enemy of this world. As fire is covered by smoke, as a mirror is covered by dust, or as the embryo is covered by the womb, similarly, the living entity is covered by different degrees of this lust." So Srila Prabhupada explains in the purport the meaning of these different analogies that are given. So each living entity has a different degree of this lust that's covering it. So the womb, if something is covered by a womb, you can't move, you can't see, you can't get out of it. So this is compared to, what is it? There's a certain type of living entity it's compared to. Trees. You can't move. You can't do anything. You can't get out of it. So when one becomes so lusty, you have so many desires, then here, just stand there. You can't do anything. So that's good. Don't cause any harm. And then when one is, you can't do anything, just like the womb. But then the dust, this, when there's dust on a mirror, if you just wipe away the dust, then you can actually see clearly. So this is compared to the lower living entities and the animals. As long as that covering is there, this animal body covering, you're not going to know what's going on. They won't know who they are, what is life, what is God, what is happening. They're covered by this lust in the form of this animal body. And while that's there, there's not much you can do to really see. But once that's gone, then we come up to the human form of life, which is compared to the fire covered by smoke. When there's smoke around a fire, you can actually see. All you have to, if you just open a window or there's a fan, the smoke easily clears and you can see. So this human form of life is the most valuable chance for the living entity to escape this entanglement of material existence by kindling that fire of bhakti, which can be done by coming in contact with a pure devotee of the Lord, someone who has love of God, and give and reawaken that love of God in a living entity. So this human form of life is so critical of a time because it's the only time when this lust can be done away with, which is ultimately the root of all of our problems. Because we have this lust to enjoy some selfish desire separate from Krishna, then all these other things come. Anger, greed, all of these things. What is it? Later transformed into wrath. And he explains more about this later on, but all these bad qualities, greed, anger, forgetfulness, bewilderment. Let's see, where is that verse? Does anyone know which verse that is? He becomes bewildered and falls down into the material pool. There we go. That's the one that was in chapter 2. 2, text 62 through 64. So here's how the living entity falls down into this material position. And this is the position that Arjuna is in on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. He's a pure devotee. His eternal service and love for the Lord can never be wiped away. But he's seeing his relatives, and as he's seeing them, this material compassion is, or this mixed compassion is arising, and he's put into confusion by the arrangement of the Lord. And so like this, he's an example for all of us. We want to serve Krishna, but somehow or other, we're not fully absorbed in his service, not a pure devotee. So how can we get rid of this? How can we purify this mixture that we're caught in? And so Arjuna he's in this mixture. He's having some material compassion, but it's also mixed with, he just wants to serve Krishna. And he wants all these living entities on the battlefield who are going to die to be able to serve Krishna too, because he's a pure devotee. So his desire, it's always linked to Krishna. But how to get that mixture purified and make it pure? First of all, here's how one falls down into the material pool. While contemplating the objects of the senses, and this is text 62 in chapter 2, Dhyayato vishayan pumsa sangasteshu pajayate sangat sanjayate kama kamat krodo bijayate. While contemplating the objects of the senses, a person develops attachment for them, and from such attachment lust develops, and from lust anger arises. So this example that's being given here, it's so quick that the second you contemplate, you're already done for. Just like you could compare it to like leaves, dry leaves, and you put a needle through the leaves. How long does it take to put the needle through the dry leaves? So you have 100 dry leaves. How long for the needle to get through all of them? Yeah, it's a second. So like this, but Krishna is breaking it down so that we can actually understand what is going on. While contemplating the objects of the senses, a person develops attachment for them, and from such attachment lust develops, and from lust anger arises. So this is the root of all of our problems, this lust. From anger, delusion arises, and from delusion, bewilderment of memory. When memory is bewildered, intelligence is lost, and when the intelligence is lost, one falls down again into the material pool. So Arjuna is now saying in this 6th chapter, what if that happens? And Krishna is giving him the answer. But earlier, he also explains how to make sure that doesn't happen. And so we also heard a little bit of it just in these few verses. He was saying, for one whose mind is unbridled, self-realization is difficult work. But for he whose mind is controlled and who strives by right means is assured of success. That is my opinion. So if the mind is uncontrolled, then there's no hope. Krishna explains that this enemy, this lust, it's captured many strong points in the fort of this body. It's got the senses, it's got the mind, and the intelligence. So he explains, just like when an enemy has taken over some area, you have to know where they are and how to get them out. And so he explains how to get the lust out of these different places. So the senses can be controlled by the rules and the regulations. So when the mind is controlled by these, then it's easy to strive for the right thing, because it's not going to contemplate and then fall down into all those other things that we saw before. So by following rules and regulations, that's why they're so important. We have the 4 principles we're following of no meat eating, no illicit sex, no intoxication, and no gambling. And these are the pillars of sinful life. They cause so many horrible things and degrade one in so many ways. So much time, energy, and wretched situations are saved just by following these principles. But then there's also other ones, such as we have all the programs, the morning program and the evening program, and services throughout the day. And in scripture, different instructions are given on how to do those services. And so like this, all these rules and these regulations, they're bridling the mind so that it doesn't go out of control and make the path of self-realization very difficult. So these things are making it our course and devotional service smooth, and keeping us from falling down into this material pool if we follow them. So in the purport to that one about the mind that we had read before, or in the purport to Arjuna's question we read earlier, Prabhupada said, therefore, despite constant endeavor, one may fail for many reasons. First of all, one may not be following the process. That's a pretty big reason. So you have to follow the process, and then we can see that progress becomes very easy. Krishna just said it before. But he whose mind is controlled and who strives by the right means is assured of success. So if we control the mind by following these instructions and rules and regulations that are given, then we can see that we'll be assured of success, is Krishna's opinion. So these are what we have to do to avoid falling down from the path of self-realization. But then what happens if one does? Almighty armed Krishna, does not such a man being deviated from the path of transcendence perish like a ribbon cloud with no position in any sphere? Purport. There are two ways to progress. Those who are materialists have no interest in transcendence. Therefore, they are more interested in material advancement by economic development or in promotion to the higher planets by appropriate work. When one takes to the path of transcendence, one has to cease all material activities and sacrifice all forms of so-called material happiness. If the aspiring transcendentalist fails, then he apparently loses both ways. In other words, he can enjoy neither material happiness nor spiritual success. He has no position. He is like a riven cloud. A cloud in the sky sometimes deviates from a small cloud and joins a big one. But if it cannot join a big one, then it is blown away by the wind and becomes a non-entity in the vast sky. The Brahmana Pati is the path of transcendental realization through knowing oneself to be spiritual in essence, part and parcel of the Supreme Lord who is manifested as Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. Lord Sri Krishna is the fullest manifestation of the Supreme Absolute Truth, and therefore one who is surrendered to the Supreme Person is a successful transcendentalist. To reach this goal of life through Brahman and Paramatma realization takes many, many births. Bahunam janmanam ante. Therefore, the supermost of transcendental realization is Bhakti Yoga, or Krishna consciousness, the direct method. This is my doubt, O Krishna, and I ask you to dispel it completely. But for yourself, no one is found who can destroy this doubt. Purport. Krishna is the perfect knower of past, present, and future. In the beginning of the Bhagavad-gita, the Lord said that all living entities exist individually in the past, that they exist now in the present, and that they continue to retain individual identity in the future, even after liberation from the material entanglement. So he has already cleared up the question of the future of the individual living entity. Now Arjuna wants to know of the future of the unsuccessful transcendentalist. No one is equal to or above Krishna, and certainly the so-called great sages and philosophers who are at the mercy of material nature cannot equal him. Therefore, the verdict of Krishna is the final and complete answer to all doubts, because he knows past, present, and future perfectly. But no one knows him. Krishna and Krishna-conscious devotees alone can know what is what. The Blessed Lord said, Son of Pritha, a transcendentalist engaged in auspicious activities does not meet with destruction either in this world or in the spiritual world. One who does good, my friend, is never overcome by evil. Purport. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, Sri Narada Muni instructs Vyasadeva as follows. Tyaktva swadharmam charanam bhujam harer bhajan apako tapate tato yadi yatra kvava badram abudamushakim ko varta apto bhajatam swadharmataha. If someone gives up all material prospects and takes complete shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, there is no loss or degradation in any way. On the other hand, a non-devotee may fully engage may fully engage in his occupational duties and yet not gain anything. For material prospects, there are many activities, both scriptural and customary. A transcendentalist is supposed to give up all material activities for the sake of spiritual advancement in life, Krishna consciousness. One may argue that by Krishna consciousness, one may attain the highest perfection if it is completed, but if one does not attain such a perfectional stage, then he loses both materially and spiritually. It is enjoined in the scriptures that one has to suffer the reaction of not executing prescribed duties. Therefore, one who fails to discharge transcendental activities properly becomes subjected to these reactions. The Bhagavatam assures the unsuccessful transcendentalist that there is no need to be, that there is no need, what? That there need be no worries. Even though he may be subjected to the reaction of not perfectly executing prescribed duties, he is still not a loser, because auspicious Krishna consciousness is never forgotten, and one so engaged will continue to be so, even if he is lowborn in the next life. On the other hand, one who simply follows strictly the prescribed duties need not necessarily attain auspicious results if he is lacking in Krishna consciousness. So what does one get if they just do their material duties perfect? Their whole life, everything perfect, job perfect, earning money perfect, this perfect, that perfect, all their material duties perfect, but without any Krishna. Any guesses? Anyone can shout them out if they want. Death, uncertainty, more karma. Any other guesses? Danger. Yeah, they don't get anything of value. But if one serves Krishna, that's an eternal asset he's getting, because he's getting the merciful glance of the Lord. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami used to say, don't try to see Krishna, but act in a way that Krishna sees you. So by engaging in Krishna's service, they're getting the merciful glance of the Lord. He's taking note of them. And he's a person. So although we may forget what's going on by death, he's not going to forget, wow, that living entity served me. And he remembers it. So you're making an eternal benefit. That's an eternal relationship there with Krishna. Whereas all the things that we can acquire in this material world, I might have a relationship in some way with this cell phone that knows what I like and don't like, and how I drive, and how I spell things, and all of these things. So I might get the nicest cell phone, car, house, all of this, but this relationship to something material doesn't matter. Once we leave the body, we'll be nowhere near it, and there's nothing substantial to it. But Krishna, he's a supreme spiritual person. He's the supreme spiritual person. So by pleasing him and serving him, he notes that forever, and that person will soon be engaged again in his service. We see there's a really nice example of Daksha in the Srimad Bhagavatam, and he made an offense to a pure devotee of the Lord. Lord Shiva and his wife Sati, they were at a yagya, a big sacrifice, and Lord Shiva's wife Sati, her father is Daksha. He's one of the Prajapatis. They're endowed with great power for begetting many, many living entities to populate the material world. And so he's very powerful and wealthy, and he's a great personality. When he's walking into this sacrifice, he looks almost like the sun god. He's glowing. He's so effulgent. And he makes an offense to Lord Shiva because he walks in, Daksha walks in looking like the sun god and glowing, and many people are offering him respects, so many things. But Lord Shiva, who's the topmost devotee and one of the most powerful personalities in the world, he's always meditating on the Supreme Lord, Krishna. So he's in meditation on the Lord, and he doesn't do anything when Daksha walks in. So Daksha becomes angry about this. And he insults Lord Shiva in so many ways, saying, who is this? He clearly is uncultured because he's not paying respects. He is unclean. So many insults. So then he goes on to do his yagyas, his sacrifices without thinking he doesn't need the devotees. No problem. This Lord Shiva, he didn't give me the respect that I deserve. So therefore, when I do this sacrifices, my work, I don't need him. So he goes to do the sacrifices and he offers the oblations and things like this. And they usually offer them to all the different demigods, but he doesn't offer any to Lord Shiva. And like this, he thinks there's no need for the mercy of the devotees. I am Daksha. I'll do it on my own prowess. But because of making this offense to Lord Shiva, Sati becomes very disturbed. She's thinking, how is it that my father can be so rude to my own husband? And so she comes, and as Jagannath Prabhu read recently, she says many things that her father, that are sharp words. And then she, through the yogic process, sets herself on fire. She says, this body is contaminated by hearing you blaspheme devotees. I don't need it. And she gives it up. So Lord Shiva becomes angry because his wife has died due to this whole big ordeal that has been brought about by Daksha's thinking that he should have been more respected and then making offenses. So Lord Shiva, he summons this huge, great, big, monstrous creature named Virabhadra. And he's dark. His hair is like copper. His teeth are like fangs. He's got many arms full of weapons. He's ferocious. So Virabhadra goes there to this sacrifice that Daksha is doing with all these brahmanas. And he's accompanied by Lord Shiva's followers, which are ghostly, ghoulish. They're ghosts and kind of goblin type of living entities. Their skin is like shark skin. They have all sorts of twisted features. They're scary. And so they go to this sacrifice and they just destroy it. They're polluting it with all sorts of polluted things, stool and blood and pus and all this. Sacrifice is ruined. They're killing everybody. They're breaking everything. It's a total devastation. And Virabhadra, he takes Daksha. Virabhadra's huge. He takes Daksha and he puts him on the sacrificial altar and he chops his head off with the axe. So Daksha made this offense to a great devotee of the Lord, and he fell down like this. But what happened was, it's not that his service is completely over. If you do some service for Krishna, it's always there. And that living entity, although they may be like this mad elephant offense, if you make an offense to a devotee, it's the worst thing, because this devotional creeper we're growing, it's trampled, just like when an elephant tramples something in a garden. But your service to Krishna is something eternal. So while it may be extremely hampered for some time, it's always there. So Daksha, once he's given a goat's head to use, and now that he doesn't have his normal head, and at some point he sees Lord Shiva, and as soon as he looks again on this devotee with great awe and reverence, and humbly offers his respects to this devotee, then immediately Vishnu appears in this amazing multi-armed feature on Garuda into his sacrifice to make it a perfect sacrifice. So like this, once he gave up his envious mentality and actually looked on the devotee in the proper way and offered his respects to the devotee, then once he's forgiven for that offense to the devotee, his service is resumed like that. So it's not that devotional service is ever temporary or destroyed, but it's an eternal asset that is always there. And so even if one falls down from the path of devotional service, they have this eternal asset with Krishna, and eventually they'll come right back to that service. Whereas if someone does all of their material duties perfectly, what was the use? Nothing eternal is gained, and you don't get anything back. But for one who serves Krishna, you get the most supreme gain of your eternal relationship and service to Krishna. So are there any comments or questions? Yes, Magadari Prabhu?
How can we identify lust creeping into our services?
Well, before the lust even happens, it's actually all starting with envy. So first, we're envious of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and therefore we end up here. So from that enviousness, we envy God, and then we become lusty. We think, okay, I can enjoy on my own. So the way to give up that envy, Krishna is explaining in the Bhagavad-gita. I mean, that's more or less the whole process of devotional service is how we give up our envy to Krishna, because love, real love, I feel funny saying that word because it's like, I don't really know what that is in the condition that I'm in currently. But so real love, which is for the Supreme Personality of Godhead, that the love, it nullifies envy. The two can't go together. So by bhakti, or this devotional loving service to the Supreme Lord, that envy is given up. So Krishna is giving everything to instruct us on how we can, because that envy is what got us here. And so he's giving all the scriptures to show us how to get out of here. So for that, we need to read all of Srila Prabhupada's books and know them. And so then we can actually know, okay, how does Krishna say to act in this circumstance? How does Krishna say to act in that circumstance? And then by following his instructions, he's telling us how to give up this envy. It's the whole goal of it, and develop our love for him. So unfortunately, if we're in a position like myself, then you see there's precise instructions given throughout the whole book in front of me. And then I just have to try to sometimes speculate or just think of something to give as an example or answer, even though the whole point of this book is showing how we can love Krishna. So if I actually just studied it and remembered the verses, then I would be able to say, oh, Krishna says this one. And that's how you give up the lust when it's creeping into the service. But instead, I got to go through a whole thing of what I've heard and maybe thought of and this and that and possibly speculate. But it's all given in the scriptures. So if we study them and know them, then we can know how Krishna is showing us to come back to him, love him, give up this lust, envy, and all these things. Sorry for the big roundabout answer. Are there any other comments or questions? Srimad Bhagavad-gita ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.